Yeah, look, the fix is in. The grift and the graft are real. There is no, no coating over the fact that the daughter-in-law to the candidate and possibly president again is there to funnel money to Donald Trump's enterprises. That is absolutely going to happen. Why is that good for Joe Biden? It's good for Joe Biden because the RNC is going to starve all of their down-ballot candidates who really need resources and field operations because the RNC is now set up solely and exclusively for Donald Trump. It's fraud, probably. We'll eventually see fraud exposed, but the reality is it's probably pretty good for Joe Biden.
Jennifer, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg dusted off his Fox News ninja skills and went on this weekend, obviously praising the president. I just want to share a bit of it.
There's been talk for years, talk, and no action. President Biden has taken action. He took action to finally let Medicare negotiate prescription drug prices over the objection of Big Pharma and congressional Republicans. He took action to make sure that we have a stronger economy, which is why more jobs have been created on his watch than any president in American history. He took action to pass an infrastructure bill where the prior president, the former president, promised it every year, failed to get it done. So we could talk about language, we could talk about words, or we could talk about action.
Jennifer, how important is it for the president to have the likes of Pete, Gavin Newsom, Gretchen Whitmer, Andy Beshear out there as these Biden Avengers for him?
I think it's how the Democrats won in 20. It's how they will win in 24, and that. So you have first of all incredibly talented messengers, and Secretary Buttigieg it was exemplified that there, and these governors are great from Shapiro, Whitmer, Tim Walz in Minnesota, Newsom. Tony Evers in Wisconsin, but also importantly, they are battleground governors that came off of tough wins in 2022. So they are fresh from the battlefield. They have good get out the vote operations. They're used to having to do this. Like Whitmer, for example, elected in 18, very tough year, reelected in 22. Had a good turn on the vote operation in 20. And so I think where they may end up being most valuable is in actually, having a great GOTV operation.
All right. Well, we will be watching. Jennifer David, thank you for joining us. When we come back, can you believe this? It was this day in 2020, March 11th, when the pandemic became real for so many of us. But 4 years later, what have we actually learned? And have we actually changed? A very powerful new book takes on that very question. The author joins us next when the 11th Hour continues.
Yeah, we remember it because right before it hit, Kim Jong-un over in North Korea kept telling everybody that a Christmas present was coming. A Christmas present was coming. And we started seeing the results of things going on over in China, of them building massive buildings within just a matter of days that should have taken at least months. And we were seeing indications of something.
Is it make a PD plan?
Something happening that wasn't considered normal.
I think COVID.
But various people in various safety positions did not raise a red flag to it until after it was too late. By that time, it done already got on the airplanes. It done already went to this continent, that continent, this continent. And now it was like an explosion of major controversy as well as death.
I think 4 years ago today, we were shutting things down, and what we've lived through, more than 1 million Americans dead, has stolen our ability to look at the bright side of things, and we've become comfortable with discomfort.
It was 4 years ago today when Donald Trump gave his Oval Office address. The NBA suspended its season, and Tom Hanks announced he tested positive for COVID. And although things have gotten so much better, the way a lot of us feel hasn't. Eric Kleinenberg joins me now to help us understand why. He's a professor of social science and a director of the Institute for Public Knowledge at NYU and the author of the new book, 2020, One City, 7 People, and the Year Everything Changed. God, 4 years ago today. What
she was talking about I want to add to it because it's not just COVID. It's along with about a dozen other different things that has struck us all at one time, including the economy, including the wars, including now people looking at us being $34-35 trillion in debt, including all the drugs, including all the illegals coming over to America, the gun violence, all the above. And it's just been a flood of information that has basically overwhelmed the majority of us to the extent that now even our children are scared to go to the malls because they don't know if they're going to wind up being shot by a mass shooter. And some of them are skeptical of even going to school. Some of them are skeptical of getting on a bus. Some of them are skeptical about going to a ballpark. Some of them are skeptical about going to a concert. This thing is real that we're going through right now. It's very real.
What do you think was the most important thing that we should learn from 2020, despite the fact that so many people don't even agree on a basic set of facts about the pandemic?
For me, the most important thing about 2020 is it told us to get through a crisis, you need solidarity, you need cohesion, you have to be able to do things together, you have to be able to trust each other, you have to be able to trust leaders. And in America in 2020, we did the opposite on all of those things. We became more divided, we became more distrustful, the country was dysfunctional. And a lot of that is about who we were becoming, but a huge amount of that, I think, is about our leadership that year.
We know about long COVID and sort of the physical aspects of it, but talk about the emotional, because COVID has also become a social disease when you think about the loneliness, the disconnect, how many of us are still holed up at home.
You know, I profile 7 people in the book. We get deep into their stories, and the through line is each one of them from very different walks of life felt abandoned. They felt left on their own. They felt like there were all these difficult problems. They needed a helping hand and some guidance. They didn't know if they were going to get a stimulus check. They didn't know if their children were going to be given relief money to get out of poverty. And when it came finally, it then disappeared soon after. It was this level of insecurity that shot through this country. And so I think we're still feeling that in an intense way. The pandemic is officially over, but there's something fundamentally off about life in this country. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that we were traumatized by 2020 and we just kind of swept it away.
It's called security, buddy. People realizes that whenever it comes to safety and security, we can just about throw that out the door since COVID has hit. From one event to another, regardless whether it's jacked up high prices, or toilet paper shortages, or I could go on and on. It's called insecurity. The people was bamboozled until COVID hit by thinking that we was secure, safe, and that life was going to go on forever. And now realization has fallen up into the land to the point of, wow, we're realizing just exactly how insecure we really are. Some of us that was harder than a rock has now been bewildered by this. And it has brought anxiety into people's lives that normally did not exist before COVID. And these are just a few of the things that are going to occur, according to the Bible, pertaining to the great sorrows. Now, depending upon who you are, what kind of relationship that you have with God, it's according to how you're looking at the glass towards it being half full or half empty. Beauty's in the eyes of the beholder. I look at this on a spiritual side of it being grand and great, because just within a matter of seconds, we could all be called home to live with Jesus and get out of this misery, get out of this insecurity. But now other people are going to look at it in a miserable way towards, oh my God, life is over as we know it. Hope is over as we know it. And if that's what they choose, then there's nothing that we can do about it. But the fact of the matter is there is hope. There is a promise. And we can pull together and we can defeat this thing on every level if we'll allow God to lead us in the right direction.
Like it didn't happen. It's time for us to remember what we went through for personal reasons, for collective reasons, and I think for political reasons also.
Then how do we solve for that? Because a lot of those things, people have monetized those divisions and it's created businesses out of it.
No question. Look, the tech industry wants us in front of our screens and not with each other face to face. They did fantastically well during 2020, and I think they're discouraging us from going back into real life where we can convene with each other in an office or in school. But I think we also know it's really unsatisfying to.
Let me ask you this. How many people remember Y2K? Y2K could have very well been a COVID. Y2K put everybody on pins and needles, and then once we realized, it was a sigh of relief. Everything isn't going to fall out of the sky. Everything isn't going to shut down. It was a con. It was a con to get people to go out and buy new equipment, to update their old equipment, and to become where we are today. And to be quite honest with you, it's almost like we're being driven or led into this wormhole that we can see coming. And some of us are scared to death of it, and some of us actually welcome it. Because ultimately, whenever it's all said and done with, all the tears, all the harm, all the hurt, all the crying, all the manipulation, all the lies, all the disastrous things that you can ever imagine or think of will finally be at its end, that Satan created in his rebelliousness against the Heavenly Father. That's whenever God the Father will create, according to the Bible, a new heaven and a new earth. And that's whenever we will be granted different positions for doing different things depending upon how we have succeeded down here. And we will go from there towards a new heaven and a new earth. I look at it as a glorious time, because out of all the generations that has had faith in Christ and that maintained their faith in Christ even unto the end, they was faithful even unto the end, just like other patriarchs and other prophets of God that we've read in the Bible. We know that this end is sure enough going to be the end. Now, there was other generations that felt like that it could be the end. And in some degree, looking at it on a personal level, it actually was their end. But the Bible says, he who shall endureth until the end shall be saved. And this is a challenge. This is a repetitious battle or fight that we have to fight every day until we take our very last final breath. And then we have made it to the end, to our physical end. But it ain't going to be the end. Not if you've got faith in Christ. Because the end of this flesh will actually be the beginning of a brand new world. As I said, Some people look at it in a negative way, while others look at it in a positive way.
Satisfying to have this digital existence and not a face-to-face one. That's something we've got to change.
But in many ways, yes, it divided us, but there are also extraordinary stories of people coming together, right? Pre-COVID, people didn't even know their neighbors' names. And then we grew to depend on one another, to feed one another, to house one another. There are extraordinary elements of how we came together.
It's a big part of the story I tell. In addition to the hyper-individualism of this country at that time, we also saw this incredible flowering of mutual aid networks across the country. In every neighborhood of New York City, you saw ordinary people coming together to provide each other with food, with diapers, with cleaning supplies, with basic services. There's an amazing woman I profiled named Nuala O'Doherty. She was a DA in Manhattan for 30 years, married to an Ecuadorian guy. They live in Jackson Heights. She converted the basement of her home into what she called the COVID Care Neighborhood Network. They did extraordinary amounts of work to help each other, help out their neighbors. Today, that same basement is the Jackson Heights Immigration Center, and they're working with asylum seekers and migrants in the United States. There's an invisible civic infrastructure that we built up in the year 2020, and that, for me, is one of the extraordinary benefits of going through that crisis together. We've got to channel that energy in 2024 if we're going to come out on the right side.
In every situation, no matter how dark, there is something hopeful to look to. We just have to choose to look in that direction. Congratulations on the book.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure to meet you.
Great to be here.
When we come back, the powerful film about Russia's assault on Ukraine was a top winner at the Oscars. The director's message to the world when the 11th hour continues.
I lost a good friend. I know one good friend that was very, very close to me. And it did. It literally rattled a lot of people. And it made people stop and think that we're not invincible, that we are all mortal, and that this dream or ideal that life is going to last forever was finally given a checklist. Now, you can go back 100 years ago, whenever the Spanish flu hit, and the reason why that they claim that there's not a whole lot of documentation about it is because people acted so irresponsible, people acted so negative, people acted so selfish and greedy, people acted so badly during that COVID. And I'm sure in other COVID or other pandemic events the same, because it catches people off their guard. The reason why that there's not a lot of documentation of it is because people was ashamed and they didn't want to document how they reacted towards who they reacted to and how that they was basically being very selfish and greedy and not loving and kind. I'm going to tell this story. I don't think the guy that I went through it with, I don't think that he's going to mind. His name is Jesse. He lives in Kitten, Tennessee. And this was during the real emotional time of toilet paper. I mean, some people actually got in fist fights in airplanes about the mask. Remember all the masks? Some people want to wear the mask. Some people ain't going to wear the mask. Some of the employers was actually blackmailing people and telling them that if they didn't get the shot, that they was going to have to go home, that they didn't no longer have a job. Anyways, we was over in Kenton at the grocery store over there, and there was one thing of toilet paper left that me and this guy caught a glimpse of at the exact same time, if you can believe that. We went in there primarily to get a big bundle of toilet paper. And there was only one left. And rather than get in a fight over who should be the one to actually purchase it and walk out with it, we split it. We split the cost. We opened up the toilet paper. I think there was 20 rows. 10 rows went to me, 10 rows went to him. Now, prior to that, do you think that I would have ever thought in a million years that I was going to have to argue over a bundle of toilet paper to the point of almost getting in an argument over, and that I was going to have to split that toilet paper with somebody? No, I didn't know that I was going to have to do that, but I did. And the reason why is because the truck didn't come in like it should have had, and the toilet paper that was already scheduled to come in hadn't showed up yet. So, you know, there was some highs and lows pertaining to us having to adapt to COVID. But all in all, so far, now this may not be this way in everybody's life over here in America, but so far, if this is the only hiccup that we've had in the past 4 years pertaining to toilet paper shortages and insecurity, compared to what other people are having to go through right now pertaining to a madman over in Russia or a madman over in the Middle East or a madman in other parts of the world, we really don't have no right to complain. We really don't have no right to complain about our dislikes, our uncomfortableness in compared to some of the people that has went through what they've went through. And I know there's certain people here in America that has went through absolutely hell because of COVID. Some of them had to be with their loved ones for weeks, months, not knowing if they was going to live or die. God only knows the cost. God only knows the loss pertaining to the financial loss. God only knows the sleepless nights. I mean, this come upon us because of a wicked demonic spirit living in the last days, just as the Bible talks about that Satan will come down in great wrath. And I still believe that Kim Jong-un in North Korea knew it was coming, and that's the reason why he kept telling everybody, we have a Christmas present for the Americans. Well, we know now what the Christmas present was, don't we?
Mariupol, it would give at least some meaning to this horror. My brain will desperately want to forget all this. But the camera will not let it happen.
The last thing before we go tonight, 20 Days in Mariupol. The Oscar winner for Best Documentary Feature is a first-person account of the early days of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The film's director says he would much rather have no Oscar and no war. Here is part of his powerful and extraordinary acceptance speech last night.
This is the first Oscar in the Ukrainian history. And I'm honored. But probably I will be the first director on this stage who will say, I wish I would never made this film. I wish to be able to exchange this to Russia never attacking Ukraine, never occupying our cities, I wish to give all the recognition to Russia not killing tens of thousands of my fellow Ukrainians.
Amen.
I wish for them to release all the hostages, all the soldiers who are protecting their lands, all the civilians who are now in their jails. But I cannot change the history. I cannot change the past. But we all together, I'm on you, some of the most talented people in the world, we can make sure that the history record is set straight and that the truth will prevail and that the people of Mariupol and those who given their lives will never be forgotten.
Never.
Because cinema forms memories, and memories form history. So thank you all, and thank you all. Thanks to Ukraine. Slava Ukraini.
You know, we like to say here that the truth matters, but only if you see it. These journalists risk their lives to share the brutal truth of the horrors being experienced in Ukraine.
Yeah, they do.
We thank you for your film and for your bravery. And on that note, I wish you all a very good and safe night. From all of our colleagues across the networks of NBC News, thanks for staying up late. I'll see you at the end of tomorrow.
There's no doubt it's essential that we have war correspondence that goes to these particular events. That way we'll know the truth in what occurred, in how it occurred, in when it occurred, and where it occurred. And there's something about knowing the truth, even though it may be the most hardest thing in the world to accept. It leaves a point of contact pertaining to closure. And the only thing that I can put an example of that comes close to that is that during the American Civil War, whenever we had young men and women that was sacrificing so dearly, whenever they was called upon to go fight for their land, to go fight for their people, one of the things that historians took note of is that so many of them had like a last will and testimony that usually they put a piece of paper in their pockets. And this piece of paper said, if all else fails, and I do not live to be able to tell this story, please, whoever finds me, please let my family know what has occurred and where I am buried at. And they claim that this went on in the North just as much as it did the South. And it's got something to do with closure.
Freaked out about Bud Light.
It's got something to do with telling people about your last will and testimony, that, hey, I had my mother on my mind. Hey, I had my father on my mind. I had my sister or my brother on my mind. Or I had Aunt Dell or Uncle Paul or whoever on my mind. Please let them know what happened and where I am buried at. Because it offered closure. Why did that? Because of truth. They wanted the true truth to come out, regardless of how incredibly hard it was to accept. At that point in time, you got to put aside your feelings and say, you know what? I want to know the truth about how he lived as much as how he died. Or as much as how she died, as much as how she lived. That's the human nature, the characteristics of the human nature of humanity. That once we deviate from that, and nothing is left sacred or important, then at that point in time, we're no longer considered human beings, but actually a step even below that. And I hope to God that we never reach that boiling point, because if you really think about the horror that went on during the Great Flood, whenever God allowed for for the world to be flooded that scientists can now confess and prove. There is no telling how horrible that horror can actually be during the state of a few hours, a few days, a few even weeks, because it lasted for 40 days, 40 nights, which is what, a little over 5 weeks or so. I don't think there is a filmmaker that could film the realization of even a percent of a thousandth of a percent of the level of horror that was going on in people's minds and in people's hearts in identifying that they was doomed, that this is the end, and there's nothing else that we can do. Kind of like the people on the Titanic. Rather than sit around and moan and groan over what's fixing to occur, the instrumentalists, the singers, the people that was on the boat kept playing music. As insanity, as insane that may sound, they kept playing until they couldn't play no more. Because they had a choice. They could have moaned and groaned and cried and screamed and yelled and got down in the floor and kicked and threw a tantrum like a little baby. But what good was it going to do? The boat was sinking. They was fixing to meet their wits' end. But there's something about closure. And I've recognized this in various historical events that means so much to most human beings. And I really think that we in the 21st century have not truly done an injustice towards the people that did die during the Great Flood, pertaining to how traumatizingly, endlessly, that had to have been during that 40 days before finally the heavens shut up and it quit raining. And then it took, I don't know how many days or weeks before Noah that was on the boat finally would send out birds, and they'd come back. All of them come back without no type of leaf or no type of twig until there towards the last. And who knows, that may have taken 6 months. It may have taken a year. It really don't detect in the time framing of that, or that I know of. But that in and of itself had to be traumatic. You're now in a boat and you're in the ocean that is now covering the whole planet. And God only knows that the storms and the water and the tidal waves and everything else. I mean, you're talking about people's lives that was living on a thread in the middle of the world on basically a bobber, bobbing up and down, not knowing if they was going to live or die. They had faith, and they had to keep their faith in God because that was the only thing that kept them together. But the story got told. The truth got told. Now, a lot of people don't want to accept the truth, like a lot of people don't want to accept the truth about the Jewish Holocaust, where they was thrown into infirmaries and concentration camps that lost about 6 million people. But it's the truth. No, there's nothing we can do about the truth, about the past. But what we can do is remember those who have went through so much suffering and hold up their names in honor of who they was, in hopes of one day our fate won't be the same. Good luck to all of us. Thank you for listening. God bless, and God bless America. And shalom.